While writing my book, Disney U, I interviewed a number of Disney pioneers, men and women who helped Walt Disney create the happiest place on earth, who helped him perpetuate his dreams, his values, his organizational culture. And one of the fundamentals that I remember from my career at Disney, and also I was reminded of this when talking with these Disney pioneers, was Walt's tendency to, as we would say, walk the park. Walt got out of his office and walked the park. He interacted with guests and he interacted with Disney employees, the cast members. And one of the men that I interviewed was the former director of the Disney University, and he talked about in his days as a teenager when he was a worker, when he was a cast member on the Jungle Cruise. And this was one of Walt Disney's famous attractions. Walt was known to come into the park on a regular basis, eat in the restaurants, go to the break rooms, interact with cast members, and ride on the different attractions. And this gentleman explained to me one time when he was a skipper on the Jungle Cruise. He was one of the boat drivers. And there's 7 boats on this attraction. And Walt Disney rode on every single boat. And at the end of this hour or two that he spent riding the ride, he got off of the boat and gathered those same skippers on the dock. Of course, he had other skippers running the show now. And he gave some pretty blistering feedback to these skippers. He said, "You know what? We've invested millions of dollars in this attraction, in the audio animatronic animals, in the soundtrack, in your costumes, in the boats. We've spent a lot of money on the hardware. But every boat that I rode today that you were skippering, this is what happened. As we're going through the deep, dark jungle, the Amazon, and we get to that one pool of water which is really dark and it's kind of scary, Walt asked us, 'What happens?' And we said, 'Well, Walt, that's when the hippos jump out of the water.' He said, 'Exactly.' And then Walt said, 'And what do the guests do when those hippos jump out?' 'Well, they scream.' 'Why do they scream?' said Walt. 'Well, they scream because the hippos are going, roar, and they're spraying water on us.' 'Exactly. So they're screaming with fright and with delight.' And this is when Walt made his most important point. He said to the skippers, 'And what were each of you doing while that hippo jumped out of the water, while the guests were screaming?' And then Walt mimicked what he saw. He said, 'You were driving the boat like this.' And this is a skipper driving a boat. Here's the wheel. 'Another day, another hippo.' You were not connected. Now I realize that you have seen this hippo jump out of the water hundreds, if not thousands of times this summer. But this is a first for the guests. And I want you to realize that that is ruining the show. There is a quote that Walt Disney used with this group of people that became part of the Disney lore. We have to keep plussing our show. In other words, improving it. We have to keep plussing our show. If we ever lose them, meaning the guests, it will take us 10 years to get them back. So Walt was imploring the skippers on the Jungle Cruise to plus the show. And these were his parting words, his marching orders for them. You have 1 week to look excited and to get a smile on your face. After all, what does a smile cost? And the man that I interviewed for the book said, you can only imagine the energy that we went with to pretend to be excited. And then we actually became excited, realizing that for these guests, this was possibly their first time on the Jungle Cruise. And we actually learned to be genuinely excited and to have genuine smiles on our face, fully realizing that Walt was going to come back next week and the week after and the week after that, because Walt liked to walk the park. So again, I ask you to consider with your teams, when you think of the investments that you've made in the hardware, whether it's for your product or your service, think also about the software, the way in which you interact with your clients, your customers, your patients. And to think again of the words that Walt used with these skippers on the Jungle Cruise dock. How much does a smile actually cost?